John, let's start with this. It's really perhaps the biggest of all things as it relates to the Eagles, and it's a topic we have visited many times, and so it's a revisit, but a warranted revisit on the way the Eagles are run. Because this has been an often scrutinized, often criticized, often praised, imagine that, often criticized, often praised part of Philadelphia sports is how the Eagles are run, top on down, with Jeffrey Lurie and Howie Roseman having massive involvement, obviously, in the operation of, let's call it, their team. I mean, it's Lurie's team. It's also our team as fans. But, Lurie empowers Howie a great deal. We know Lurie has his own chunk of influence that is probably a lot more than most NFL owners. We know no one has more influence in all of the NFL as an owner than Jerry Jones. It's not on that level. Jeffrey Lurie's not the owner of the team. Excuse me, not the general manager of the team. Howie Roseman is. We know Howie Roseman does more than most GMs, or at least we certainly think so, when it comes to involvement beyond the typical GM scope. I mean, it's just an unusual setup. And so I will ask everybody, it's worth a revisit here. Season's over, off season's begun, decisions were made, and I'm curious at 215-592-9494, where are you listening right now? Now, in February of 2024, stand on this often discussed volatile issue, back and forth we go, about the type of involvement, the big involvement of Jeffrey Lurie and Howie Roseman, and what you think now, plus or minus, on the whole shebang. Again, 215-592-9494. I will tell you this right out of the gate. While it makes me feel uneasy to a certain degree, while it probably causes problems at times, I acknowledge that, I am still all good. I am still all in on the Jeffrey Lurie, Howie Roseman thing. And if for no other reasons, two very, 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 very basic reasons. Reason number one, the Eagles are, even if it seems wonky, okay? Number one, the Eagles are consistently one of the best teams in pro football. They're going to have their down years. 2020 was a disaster. They had their down month in December and in January. But they are, and this is a fact, you can look it up, you can look at the numbers, they are consistently one of the best teams in pro football. And reason number two, they are consistently, now maybe this will change in the coming years due to the Phillies, we'll see, but the Eagles are consistently the best team in Philadelphia sports. Just a fact. So as we sit here today and revisit this age-old topic, I'm still good with it, even though it feels kind of weird. And I want to hear from you at 215-592-9494. John, what you have called Howie many times, where do you stand now, February 2024, on this big one?
Howie is running the show. We are a powerhouse because Howie is running the show. So I appreciate the job that he's done. Man, he is he's executive of the year every year if you want to give it to him, because he always does.
Well, he's not that. No,
top of the line job.
He's not every year. He's had some disastrous years.
No, well,
this year was not good.
If we're going back, yes.
He said two. I think he said two
as
in
of
particular.
Late, Howie, not Howie. I'm saying Howie is really at the top of the tank. I think they need to consider backing off a little bit with the power structure as it stands. It has worked. It is now wonky because we're teetering on the edge of, the coach is now in a spot where I don't know if it's going to be easy for the players to respect them all the time. Like this power structure, yes, it's been incredible. And there are people, very, very smart people, teams and teams of smart people in the NovaCare facility who are filtering fantastic information to Howie, and he somehow absorbs and applies all of it, and he surfs the NFL for the team's benefit. He does a great job. I'm okay with that because he's great at that. But this setup right now it feels like it's taken power away from the main guy, and that could prove problematic. And I don't know, maybe the Eagles are hoping that it's like out of sight, out of mind, and time heals all wounds. And as the offseason progresses and new guys come in from other teams, everything will sort of get, washed clean in the shuffle. But, Nick Sirianni was stripped of some power.
No question. That's right.
Lingers
That's right.
for me. And I think that must linger for these players. I don't know how that plays out on the field.
Don't you think they already had that, though, John? I mean, I agree with you.
Not like this.
Not like this. That's fair.
Not
fair.
to this degree.
Yeah,
wow.
No, I agree.
Look, Nick needs to be perceived as infallible. And this is my old school belief, Joe.
Yep.
Like my belief when I looked at John Gruden, when I looked at Andy Reid across the practice field, they were like the benevolent rulers of the field, and of the team and of the building. And their football acumen and their opinion, it was inarguable. They knew all. They knew everything.
And you knew that they knew.
Absolutely. And everyone knew. And right now, it feels like the only entity that's infallible and inarguable or unarguable, whichever the word is, at the NovaCare facility is Howie Roseman. That is a problem for me. The players need to perceive the coach in a little bit different light. And I'm not sure how we get there with where we're coming from.
Well, ultimately, you probably get there by changing coaches someday, and then maybe a new coach has more power year one, or maybe he doesn't. I mean, maybe Doug and Sirianni didn't have much power year one, and it was a little bit less transparent, but generally understood, both internally by players of the NovaCare and externally by us. I mean, I never perceived Doug and Sirianni as having the greatest grip on things. What I know is I saw both of them take the Eagles to the Super Bowl. I saw one of them lead the Eagles to a championship. I saw the other, obviously, with a team that should have won a championship. Now I'm frustrated they didn't, and you can make the case maybe choosing a weaker head coach was a preventative factor in winning that game. Maybe it was. Maybe it wasn't. I mean, maybe defensive backs should stop playing good football, and maybe the defensive coordinator, made some mistakes and not getting the guys to adjust. And by the way, Patrick Mahomes is on the other side, and maybe that explains it all. I mean, it's a strange thing. I mean, there's no question it's a strange thing. We all know these guys, and I'm talking about Lurie and Howie, have massive involvement in this operation. The question is whether it's good for the Eagles or not, whether it's best for the Eagles or not, whether you think, and again, you can weigh in at 215-592-9494, they should back down and learn from some of the ills, and there have been ills. I mean, guys, you guys know I am, generally speaking, a big believer in the Eagles. Obviously, I've been espousing a lot of negativity lately. I think it's been warranted. But for the most part, I'm someone, and this even goes back, honestly, predates Lurie. I'm not trying to make a whole referendum here in the Eagles' last 30 years, but I'll say this. They've been pretty damn good. I mean, since 1988, and that's going back 35 years now, they've won 10 or more games an awful lot. They've made the playoffs an awful lot. That's what I've seen for most of my lifetime. I have come to expect the Eagles to be pretty good more often than not. And it's a joy of life for me. It really is. I mean, the other teams, no. I used to have it with the Flyers, not anymore. I mean, gotten better this year, but the Eagles are the team. And Lurie and Howie are a huge part of that. Now, could they dial it back and be more effective as an organization? Maybe. And I'll ask you at 215-592-9494 if you want them to dial it back to become more effective as an organization. Tell me how. Tell me where. Tell me the tangible thing you want to see them take a step back from to empower someone else to do. I mean, maybe it's something as simple as let the head coach pick his coordinators. Maybe it already happens. Maybe it doesn't. That's the other thing, John. There is that mystery. I mean, we knew when Jim Schwartz was literally hired before Doug Peterson, we knew Doug didn't hire Jim Schwartz because Jim Schwartz was hired first.
Yeah, had a sinking feeling.
You could see that one. Mm-hmm. Now it's in a little bit more of a nebulous zone, right? Who really, can decide? Who really said, let's go Patricia?
Well, Nick's saying, I hired him when I hired him, I decided to hire him.
But we all know
making it pretty clear.
Nick's also saying, let's try to get a pass interference down the field, and 3 weeks later, A.J. Brown's like, hey, that wasn't Nick's fault.
So are you saying you just distrust Nick Sirianni more than you distrust Howie Roseman?
I'm saying this. When it comes to what they say publicly, I distrust a lot. Honestly.
I don't know how we should be expected to trust anything.
That's not good.
Yeah,
all right, bad. Where do you stand on this? Because we want to see the team, build it back up. They got to rebuild the defense. They got to get their culture a little bit more aligned. They got to figure out offensive scheme. But it really does all start with the decision makers and whether you are comfortable. And I'm curious at 215-592-9494 with Lurie and Howie's involvement, how free, as John has called it many times, and your perception of how they run things. Joe DeCamara, John Ritchie, we'll get into the Brazil reality. We'll tell you today how you can win Green Day tickets. We'll do the Embiid thing. There's a lot of stuff going on there. We'll get to it all. Your thoughts, your phone calls, 215-592-9494.